By the way, at rootsaction.org, you can email your state legislators about that idea, that pay it forward educational funding idea from Oregon, which is obviously not as good as free education, which ought to be a human right and supposedly is, but is a step in that direction. When love and truth are both mentioned in the framing of the session, I have to stop and question it, because there's a certain way in which I think we fail to recognize that the truth often is nowhere close to love. The number one factor in determining whether someone is in a prison in the United States of America is whether they were locked up and put in a prison as a young person in the United States of America. So the idea of juvenile prisons or of adult prisons making people better in any way rather than manufacturing criminals is just false, right? And so you cannot explain something like prisons with the rationale set forth for it. You have to have sadism. You have to have evil. You have to have an explanation that explains both the system and the atrocities and the guards pitting kids against each other to fight for entertainment and so forth. Same goes for war. The justifications for war don't hold up. It's counterproductive on its own terms. Wars are not won, as Jeanette Rankin said, any more than a hurricane is won. And so you need something. I remember a conversation later made public among advisors in the White House during the ongoing war on Vietnam, in which they literally said to each other, we're going to continue this, now let's figure out a reason why, for themselves. And then figuring out public reasons why was a whole nother conversation. But that they were going to do it just went without saying. And so the idea, we always want a rational explanation. We always want to look to the greed and the profit or the humanitarianism, but often it's irrationality. It's evil, it's meanness, it's machismo, it's sadism, and it's not love, and it's not beauty, and truth, whatever Keats may have told us, isn't always beauty. I think the United States fails dramatically compared to other nations in recognizing what it's done. In Japan, there are museums about Japan's past crimes and wars. In Germany as well. I mean, Germans to a fault. The German peace movement won't say a word against Israel because of their awareness. In the United States, people have no idea what was done to the Philippines or Vietnam or in the world wars or in Iraq or right here, yes, the initial mass genocide that launched the United States on its course and still names its weapon systems and combat units and helicopters, the slaughter of the people who lived here. But I think that love is not opposed to truth in the sense that only by figuring out how to love people are we going to start to understand them, meaning in particular the targeted people, the enemy people. We cannot value them unless we figure out love, agape, brotherly, sisterly love, not romantic love, not parental love, but love of humanity. And I think we have to begin, of course, by ceasing to identify people with governments and talking about the Iraqi people or the ISIS people, the Sunnis who have adopted ISIS as the fearsome people who are fighting back and opposing the illegitimate government in Baghdad. I've seen accounts of families and people in Afghanistan who supported the Soviets, supported the Taliban, supported the Americans. Many of the people in Guantanamo from Afghanistan were not just rivals who somebody pocketed $5,000 for squealing on, but were the greatest supporters of the new U.S. occupation, who happened to have previously supported the Taliban because that was who was in power. People are opportunistic, people are practical, people move with the times. And so, but the United States figures, once a Taliban, always evil. And so, members of ISIS sympathizing and lamenting on Twitter over the death of Robin Williams which happened, is a different picture of ISIS than the throat-slitting maniacs. It makes you think maybe we could talk to those people. We're supposed to talk to Barack Obama, who kills hundreds of innocent people with missiles from drones, which to my mind is not different from killing people with knives. Shouldn't we think about talking with everyone? That is a question of very difficult love. Similarly, Honduran refugees, as already mentioned, we have to look at their situation and what caused it and what happens when you train murderers and torturers in Georgia and send them to other countries and support coups and then pretend you had nothing to do with it. It also is a question when we're trying to deal with counter-protesters and war advocates and members of the military in active duty, potential resistors, that is to say, potential whistleblowers. We have to figure out how to confront them while loving them. I'm always reminded of my friend David Hartso's account in his book just coming out now of his incredible life thus far in Alexandria or Arlington, Virginia, one of the early sit-ins with a knife to his throat, saying to the man holding the knife, "You do what you think you have to do, brother, but I'm going to try to love you anyway." And the knife dropping to the floor. That is the essence of what has to be done on a larger scale. And yet I think at the same time, we have to figure out how to view supporters of war in the way, sort of from the perspective of the future, in the way that we now view past slave owners and supporters of slavery or supporters of any barbaric practice of the past. Because we ought to come to see it as that evil, even though it is our friends and neighbors and our elected officials, our leaders who are engaged in this outrageous behavior. I think another thing that we are up against is defeatism. And in particular, when you start talking about ending all war, as opposed to just a particular war, you get told that you can't. It's in our genes, it's in our economics, it's in our history, it's natural. You know, the one thing that you have to take people and train them and condition them for months to do brainlessly, and they still can't survive it, and it creates a huge level of suicide. We take that thing and we call it natural. You know, there is absolutely nothing natural about war. And it is not in most of human history and prehistory and not in lots of human societies. And so it's not in our genes, it's in our culture. And it's not just in the root causes that facilitate it and run parallel to it. It is a cultural choice that can be begun or continued or ended all on its own. We can have all the evils of capitalism without war. Now, we got to end them all, and ending them all is going to give us the coalition and the bigger, better Occupy movement to do it. But war is a cultural choice. And if you want to see humanity with a much lesser degree of militarism, just look at the other 95% of humanity that's not this country, because they are doing a much lower degree of militarism. We also are, of course, up against the beliefs in humanitarian and protective wars. And we have to confront those with facts, but we also have to confront them by giving people confidence, by telling people about the victories, if that's what it takes, and ultimately by getting people off the victory dependency and able to continue to work joyfully and strategically and courageously without expecting to win any moment, understanding that it may be a next generation that achieves the victories we're seeking. There is an urgency that makes that difficult, and it's an urgency that we exaggerate, and we want to do it this week because we know we have to do it in the next few years. But we have to not just give people the facts, but give them confidence, give them a willingness to see evil in their beloved elected officials, to understand that these are people behaving sociopathically, that we have sociopathic behaviors in our society as a whole, not just in particular individuals, and giving people the courage to overcome their fears, including the fears of their future that Steve was discussing. I'll leave it there and we'll continue the discussion.